One of the fundamental theories in traditional Chinese medicine is the five elements theory, Xing. The five elements encapsulate how health, organ functions, and emotions are interconnected and should be balanced for better health and well-being. The five elements of wood, fire, earth, water, and metal represent various natural forces that influence the physiology and overall well-being of the human body. When these elements are deficient or in excess, an imbalance will cause emotional and physical disturbances, ultimately manifesting as illnesses with corresponding symptoms. With comprehension of the five elements and how they interact with one another, TCM practitioners can diagnose imbalances within the body and prescribe herbal remedies, acupuncture, and lifestyle changes to restore balance to the body. In this video, we will review the five elements and their connections, the interrelations between the elements, and then give an example of how this all plays out in pathology through the lens of pancreatic cancer. To start off, we will begin with the element of wood. Wood is associated with spring, wind, the color green, the sour taste, anger, and with the liver and gallbladder. Similar to a tree, wood has characteristics of growth, expansion, and flexibility. When balanced, wood provides one with motivation and strength. However, when unbalanced, irritability and frustration will occur. These can manifest as headaches, rib pains, and more. Moving on, fire is associated with summer, heat, the color red, the bitter taste, excessive joy, and the heart and small intestines. The symbolization of warmth, enthusiasm, and transformation governs the body's circulation and the nervous system. When balanced, fire provides one with passion and direct communication. However, when unbalanced, anxiety and mental restlessness can arise. These can present as excessive sweating with a flushed face, insomnia, and more. As we can see here, earth is associated with the late summer, dampness, the color yellow, sweet taste, pensiveness or overthinking, and with the spleen and stomach, among other things. The characteristics of stability and nourishment grounds the human body and governs digestion and the process of metabolism. When balanced, earth provides one with empathy and stability. However, when unbalanced, a lack of concentration and overthinking can occur. Physical symptoms such as fatigue, indigestion can arise. Moving on, water is associated with winter, cold, the color black or dark purple, the salty taste, fear, and the kidneys and bladder. The characteristics of wisdom and adaptability give one the capacity to overcome adversities with resilience. When balanced, water provides one with intuition and resilience. However, when unbalanced, fear and detachment will occur. Physical symptoms such as fatigue, pains in the lower back, knees, and cold in the extremities can occur. Moving on, metal is associated with autumn, dryness, white, the pungent taste, sadness and grief, and the lungs and large intestines. The characteristics of clarity and precision correspond to how metal structures can be malleable while also being strong. When balanced, metal provides one with clear thinking and profound inner strength. However, when unbalanced, stubbornness and unhealthy attachment to emotions can occur. These arise physically as respiratory problems such as shortness of breath and coughing, and irregular bowel movements. Now we will talk about the relationships between the elements. There are two main categories: the balancing cycles, which are harmonious and naturally maintain the balance within the body, and the pathological cycles, which arise when imbalance occurs and when deficiency and excess arise. There is also relationships between the elements and organs based on the cosmological sequence, but we will not cover this in our video. We will begin with the generating cycle. The generating cycle describes the interdependence of the elements and the mother-child relationships among them. The cycle follows a continuous loop where each element is generated and nourished by the previous. It ensures balance in the body and demonstrates how each element, and by extension each organ, supports and is supported by another. The sequence is as follows. Wood generates fire, fire generates earth, earth generates metal, metal generates water, and water generates wood. Within these relations, there is the mother-child relationships of the organs. You can read those underneath the subheadings of the different generation interactions. We will now move on to the controlling cycle. The controlling cycle describes how each element is restrained or controlled by another. This is, however, a generalization, as usually the functions support each other in their respective processes. Either way, this sequence in combination with the generating sequence ensures harmony between the elements and organs, where there is neither deficiency or excess. The sequence is as follows. Wood and the liver controls earth and the spleen. Fire and the heart control metal and the lungs. Earth and the spleen control water and the kidneys. Metal and the lungs control wood and the liver. Water and the kidneys control fire and the heart. I have included examples of how this plays out underneath the subheadings. You can read them as you are viewing this slide. Moving on, we will now discuss the two pathological cycles, the overacting cycle and the insulting cycle. To begin, the overacting cycle describes the excessive restraining effect that one element has on another when it is either in excess or when the other is in deficiency. It occurs in the same path as the controlling cycle, but it is an overaction that causes imbalance and thus it is considered a pathological cycle. The sequence is as follows. Wood suppresses earth, fire suppresses metal, earth suppresses water, metal suppresses wood, water suppresses fire. You can read the organ associations below the subheading. Moving to the insulting cycle. This cycle refers to the abnormal reversed restraining effect that an element has on another. This occurs when the element becomes too strong and turns back on the restraining element and attacks it. The sequence is as follows. Wood insults metal, fire insults water, earth insults wood, metal insults fire, and water insults earth. Again, you can read the organ associations and examples underneath the subheadings. For our case study, we decided to focus on an example of pancreatic cancer as experienced by Steve Jobs before he passed away. On the screen, you can see a brief outline of the symptoms that he would have experienced at different stages of his disease progression. Before I begin, I would like to preface this by saying that our understanding is probably incomplete due to our early stage in study. Not only this, but we're only focusing on the interactions between the elements, and thus it's not a comprehensive view of how the treatment would progress in a clinical setting. Furthermore, in a clinical setting, we would be able to be informed by what we observe in the patient. What we have done here is a theoretical consideration of how the elements are interacting and may not accurately represent what is happening or how it would be treated. However, I think it is an interesting way to consider the interactions between the elements and to begin to understand the complexity of how they may interact. I will now move on to an explanation of the interaction of the elements in relation to pancreatic cancer. From the perspective of traditional Chinese medicine, Steve Jobs had spleen deficiency. In the 5 elements theory, the spleen corresponds to earth, which governs the transformation and absorption of fluids. Loss of appetite and indigestion leading to weight loss are caused by the weakness of the spleen and stomach, which are unable to properly transform and absorb nutrients. On the screen, you can see a diagram that illustrates the interactions between the elements. We can see that spleen deficiency is a result of excess wood overacting on earth and deficient fire not being able to generate earth. Abdominal fluid retention causes abdominal pain due to the weakness of the spleen and stomach, which are unable to process fluids in the body, leading to an excess of fluid in the abdominal cavity. The Su Wen, Plain Questions, section of the Neijing states that pain arises from obstruction. According to the insulting cycle, when the spleen is excessively weakened, it fails to suppress the power of the kidneys. You can see this in the diagram where deficient earth fails to suppress water, resulting in excess water. This would further explain the cause of excessive fluid accumulation in the abdominal cavity. On the other hand, spleen deficiency also weakens the power of the lungs. On the screen, you can see that deficient earth fails to generate metal, leading to deficient metal or the weakness of the lungs. According to the Xing, the lungs and the large intestine are related. Therefore, if lung qi is weakened, the movement of the large intestine will slow down, leading to difficulties in natural excretion and causing issues such as food stagnation and indigestion. Additionally, suffering from a serious illness leads to emotional distress and significant mood swings. According to the Xing, anger corresponds to the liver, and worry or overthinking corresponds to the spleen. Prolonged emotional distress and significant mood fluctuations further damage the spleen and liver. This is demonstrated by excess wood corresponding to anger and deficient earth which has been harmed by worry. In summary, according to the theory of the 5 elements, combined with the concept from the Xing of for deficiency, tonify the mother, and for excess, drain the child. When treating symptoms of spleen deficiency, we need to use methods such as acupuncture or herbal remedies to nourish the mother of the spleen, which is the heart, or fire. This is because fire generates earth. You can see on the screen that because there is deficient fire, it fails to generate earth, leading to deficient earth. Hence, by nourishing fire or the heart, you would hope to bring balance to the deficient earth and to the other elemental interactions. That brings us to the end of our example and to the end of our video. Thank you for watching.